if we could just magically erase the price difference, if these prices for our proposal and this competitive proposal are exactly the same, are you telling me that you would choose us? Do I understand you correctly? Yes. Okay. Help me understand, because I want to make sure when I come back to you with a revised proposal, nothing comes out that's critical to you. What is it about our proposal, our services, our team, our company, what we've put together that has you answer that way? Why would we be the choice if price were no issue? And then shut the heck up and listen.
You're listening to RevOps Champions, a podcast created for B2B leaders to help you align your people, streamline your processes, trust your data, and leverage technology in order to grow your business. We're your hosts, Brendan Denewell
and Amy Weaver.
People are not generally aware they have a pricing problem or that there's a solution to it. They more often would articulate that, they're feeling the squeeze on margins, that inflation has really, put a lot of pressure on their financials. They're doing the best they can in the face of a competitive, and commoditized landscape. They want to kind of point to customers or competitors as the problem. And so it's very often the case that people are not in kind of what marketers would say are not problem aware or solution aware until they hear me on a podcast or see me on a stage or read a blog, article that was forwarded to them. And all of a sudden there's maybe this eureka moment, hopefully, where they realize that some of their pricing power is actually inside of their control, that everything isn't up to the customers and the competitors. It's not all market forces, that we inside our own organizations have some say in what we charge and what we're paid for the value that we deliver.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of, similarities, and we experience the same thing when, I guess we could answer the same question in a very similar way. When we're pulled in by, another trusted advisor of the clients we end up working with, they weren't aware that they might need a new CRM. All they felt was that there was misalignment somewhere in their organization, whether it was between teams or a data misalignment or a process misalignment, which of course are most likely leading indicators and things you need to fix first before we can go in and do our area of expertise, which sounds very similar to your approach.
That's right. And what I find is it's not uncommon once somebody becomes aware that our services exist, they will do a version of kind of telling us what they think their problem is and what they think they need to fix it. And it's a little bit like going to the doctor and saying, my elbow hurts, I need surgery. And I always, want to slow folks down a little bit and ask more questions. So, tell me about your symptoms. What are the pain points you're having? So that then I can diagnose and prescribe, because sometimes it's not a surgery, it's a physical therapy, right? So the solve for the pain point of the client isn't necessarily obvious to them out of the gate, or what looks obvious is sometimes not the real problem or the most expedient problem to fix. And it sounds like you experience a lot of that in your business as well.
Well, a lot of times it happens at these inflection points in their business. Maybe not necessarily that things are going bad, but it's actually a period of really high growth. And they're trying to come up with ways that they can scale rapidly and efficiently. And you touched on that in your blog post as well, as like, if you're charging for what your services or product is worth, then you free up resources a lot of times to concentrate on those other things. Do you have a specific use case or like client that you've worked with where this was the case for them and it was time for them to increase their pricing so that they could prepare for this rapid growth?
Yeah, for sure. One of the ones that pops into my head immediately is a translation firm we worked with in Chicago. Really good firm, really expert at their translation services, had a really unique ability to deliver that value in a pretty different way. And they had been competing on this per word basis that everybody does, even the folks that are not delivering the level of quality that they were doing. And one of the frustration points of the leader was we have so many opportunities to grow, to add new services, to try to figure out how to incorporate some of the machine translation and AI, and how do we become the translation firm of tomorrow, and with cutting edge technology, with world-class teams, with deep expertise if we can't invest in those things. And our ability to invest in those things is really being hampered by the fact that we're kind of fighting over scraps with some of our competitors who can't do the same things we can do. And so putting into place a certainly system, but more than the system or even the skills is the mindset inside the team of sellers, the people who have to communicate with customers about how to get paid for value and why they should and deserve to. Those things translated to substantial dollars that they poured back into infrastructure, training, technology, and hiring. And it's really poised them for dramatic growth into this next decade.
A lot of your responses to our questionnaire also include the change management piece. And I wonder how much of that is involved in your advising of your clients.
I think it's just so important. It's very common that senior leaders can see a better way to do things, and they're not even wrong about the better way. The issue is sometimes we sort of put the better way in place and walk away and hope that the change sticks. And I specialized in organizational behavior when I got my MBA, and I've just always been really fascinated at how organizations all row in the same direction or not. And what we know is if people understand the reason for the change, they've been given a chance to voice their concerns and questions, and they're bought in why it's important and it's valuable and how they personally tie to it, then the change becomes permanent. Then it becomes ritual and routine. It doesn't become a flavor of the month. It's one of the reasons why we're primarily focused on training for teams more so than strategy setting. I'll just say just a little bit more about that. Very often a senior leader may come to us and say, hey, we need our pricing strategy to be improved or changed. We need to fix this or fix that. And I say, if you spend you can spend a lot of time and money making your strategy perfect. And if you do not have the hearts and minds of the sellers who have to go carry that pricing strategy into the customer's house and communicate and defend it, then what's going to happen is you're going to have this really fancy strategy that the salespeople are going to march right around and discount anyway. It's like giving the keys to a Ferrari to a toddler. So while upgrading strategy is not a bad idea, it's generally not the biggest opportunity or gap or problem. And I would say if you're going to invest in one, invest in the people, invest in the mindset and skill set of the people whose job it is to communicate and defend value. I'm always quoting and maybe possibly slightly misquoting, paraphrasing George Patton, who says, a good plan violently executed today is better than a perfect plan next week. It's like very often these companies that come to me, their pricing strategy is very solid. Is it perfect? No. Should we maybe take a look at it? Yes. But if they invest in the change management aspect of helping their people see a different way to get paid for value, the payback period on that is lights out. And now you've really changed not only the performance of the company financially, but you've also changed the culture, one that's oriented around value and pride in that value.
Yeah, and you're starting to get into, mindset, and which of course is a big reason for needing change management and training, right? Is, what they say, one of the most dangerous mindsets or cultures, depending on how big you want to go in a business, is when teams say, this is how we've always done it, right? And I guess the second worst one is probably, this is how everybody else does it, right? So you gave the example of, the translation business where, which again, like a lot of other businesses, they charge by the word or by the minute or by the, it's like, there's got to be, at some point someone's going to come along and say, well, that might not be the best way to price a value-based service. Just because everyone else does it, that's an opportunity for you to do something different, and imagine what that could do for your business, right?
Well, and you mentioned in your blog post the industries like of professional services or manufacturing, distribution, those companies who would have maybe a lower volume of clients, but a higher complexity of what they're offering. These are the folks that need to, I guess, give the most thought to this, because it isn't a transactional type thing. It's a very long-term engagement, potentially involves the strategy and the training piece. I think there are a lot of parallels actually with what you do for folks and what we do. You're just looking at it from your pricing lens, and we're looking at it from a technology lens, and how the technology can kind of support the processes and people internally.
Yeah.
Um,
There's a couple things that come to mind on based on your comments. The first is kind of circling to the last point, this idea of, like, for example, professional services firms. You're a marketing company or consulting company or an engineering company or a law firm. These are companies that don't have high transaction volume, right? They may only have 10 or 15 or 20 or 50 deals a year, making each individual sale very high stakes. Right. You're not talking about somebody buying a 13-cent, bolt or fastener. You're talking about tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in a contract, and everyone is high stakes. And that really kind of starts to point to why the mindset can be such a powerful tool or an obstacle to success, because the higher the stakes, the more fear kicks in. And I want to kind of circle that back to the mindset thing that Brendan mentioned. Fear is an undercurrent an undercurrent obstacle to change management across lots of disciplines and lots of changes you might be interested in. But specific to pricing, there's a really high degree of fear around that topic. I've met many thousands of salespeople in my day, and I love asking salespeople why they like being in sales. What do you love about selling? What do you love about your profession? What makes you proud about it? What do you like to do? And I've never one time had a salesperson tell me they love when they get to tell somebody what it costs. So that is not the fun part. They like to build relationships, solve problems, connect with value, consultatively sell, all kinds of other things, but they don't love that part. So if you consider, even for very accomplished, successful, well-trained, highly effective salespeople, and anybody who sells, I'm going to say not just people whose job is quote unquote salesperson, but anybody in a sales seat, that is an area of less comfort than many other aspects of the job. And when we're uncomfortable, that often triggers fear, especially if there's any portion of your compensation that might be tied to your ability to get this customer to say yes. All of a sudden, you're talking about your family and your community because it's a paycheck. It gets very emotional, and understandably so. I think that power comes from not ignoring the emotion or pretending it's not there, but acknowledging it and then using that. And how do we leverage the energy that's in fear and transform that to power, and connect that together, pull a thread through all of the other selling skills that person can, possesses, like asking great questions, like communicating value, like handling objections. All of those skills in absence of a healthy mindset are pretty useless, but you connect them with a helpful mindset and it's a powerhouse.
I love all those examples. And we deal with a lot of professional services firms too, and so I like the way you position that for them, because I'm sure there'll be a lot of them listening to this. Casey, the thing that came to mind as you were explaining this last piece around how no salesperson ever said they love talking about the cost of something. In professional services businesses, we've been trained over a long time to talk about the investment rather than the cost, right? But clearly, there's a lot more to it. It really speaks to, well, how are you creating that value proposition through your conversations with the prospect, so that when you get to talking about price, you're talking about an investment and not a cost, right?
That's right.
Do you talk much about that?
So there's a few things in there that I really love. So first of all, if I change the word when I say, "Hey, when you get to tell them how much they invest," the fear is the same. Like, we can label it a different thing. Nobody's more comfortable. Not nobody. I would say by and large, the relabeling doesn't change the fear problem. So that's one thing I would say. The other thing I would say, and this gets a little more specifically to your question, the importance of how we message things and how we position things. So I'm a consultant, so I make up statistics all the time. Here's one: 50% of getting pricing right is getting the number right, and the other 50% is how we make people feel about it. In other words, the messaging that we wrap around it, but not just the messaging. It isn't just about calling it an investment versus a price or a fee. It's also about everything that we do, and this is the point you were making, Brendan, so powerfully, is it's about everything we do leading up to that point, that the investment isn't feel like the wrong label. It feels like the right label, because we've talked about the problems that they're trying to address and how this is a very affordable, investment to solve this massive problem or achieve these huge goals or whatever it is. That really, would you not invest this 10,000 to get this 100,000? Would you not invest this 100,000 to get this million? And once you've made a compelling story that people believe in, that you can actually deliver, that's on the other side of that investment, then price becomes very secondary. So it is about the messaging, but it isn't just a wordplay. It's wordplay plus the really important work of convincing the customer that the value is really there.
So I guess with professional services companies who have their sales, let's say they've got the whole sales thing figured out, including this positioning piece, which of course is critical, then it still comes down to whoever is delivering the service to do the training and the change management, because without that, no one's going to adopt this change, and it's not going to take hold. So actually, I like the how that's kind of developed here, where because it's a sales challenge on the one hand, and then it also becomes a delivery challenge, and they're different. And of course, every professional services firm knows exactly what we're talking about, because they all have this battle between sales and delivery, and continuously improving how they align what's being sold to what's being delivered, and the handoff, etc. So there's work to do. There's work to do on both sides as you deliver value to clients, right?
100%. And I see, gaps on both sides. So, very commonly we see in the kind of clients we serve, and it sounds like we have, quite a bit of overlap in our client base, is that these are companies that are best in class or better in class. They tend to be at the top of their game. They're not perfect, of course, but if you kind of compare them to the industry average, they're better than average substantially. Why that matters is that they're constantly compared against inferior competition from a price perspective. And so down the street can do it for this price. And that kind of constant downward price pressure from the market, which is completely sensible from the customer's perspective. Of course, they have other things to pay for. They have employees and budgets and everything else. But those tactics translate in the heads of the seller as market intel, or as some kind of facts about what we're worth or what we can charge based on the fact that so-and-so down the street charges less. Why that matters is if you're a best-in-class company or better-in-class company delivering really superior value, what often happens in professional services firms is we're doing a bunch of things for free. We're undercharging for things. We're way over delivering value. We're not delivering 100% of the value we were hired to deliver. We're delivering 120 or 150 or 200%. And so and what that causes is if we budgeted, I don't know, 250 hours for this such and such service, and we've spent 350 hours. Now the whole team is taxed. People are, because in a professional services firm, what you're selling is not a widget. It's a person's expertise and often their time. And what that means is everybody's stretched really thin. Now ops is mad at sales. Sales is like, we're not getting the credit we deserve for all the value that we deliver. And so sometimes both of these sides staying really connected to each other about the value allows us to, if the client, scope creep, for example, huge problem, right? Like, let's not let the scope creep and do an extra 50 hours before we have a conversation with the customer. One of the challenges in delivery teams is those are folks that are very expert and committed to the craft, whatever that craft is, that, that consulting service, that engineering service, that marketing service. They're really, really good at delivering the craft. What they don't love is what quote unquote confrontational price discussion with the customer about scope change and about more money. And so some of the folks on the delivery team would rather work for free than have a confrontation. Oh, it'll only take me an extra couple of hours. I'll just knock that out. But before you know it, you have bled through tons of profit that you deserve as a firm through that kind of like, well, it's good customer service. We seduce ourselves into thinking it's the right path. And I'm not for, delivering that contract at 101 or 105. That's fine. Don't deliver it at 150%.
Yeah, I'm sure a very common challenge that we know well from experience too.
Are there any other challenges that you see companies facing, whether it's now or even previously in your career, with having some of these more difficult pricing conversations internally, I guess?
Yeah, there's a couple things that we see. One is the kind of I'll often ask this to a CEO when I'm having a sales conversation about our services, and they give a wry grin when I ask it. I said, "Do you ever feel like your folks negotiate more with you than they do the customer?" And they kind of laugh, like they won't go spend 5 minutes selling the customer on this high fee, but they will spend 5 hours telling the boss why they're getting killed out there, and they got to do it at a lower margin, or they got to match a price. And so that is one frustration I hear from a lot of leaders, and it's rooted in the lack of confidence and arming that seller with the tools and the methods and messaging to go have that conversation more effectively. The other one that is where internal conversations really come about is some pre-discounting, and this is very common in professional services firms. You have 6 weeks of the junior engineer's time, and we've got a dev on this. But you figure it all out, you add it all up, and you use the rate cards, and all of a sudden it's a $280,000 project, and you're like, oh my gosh, I think they were budgeting like 200. Like we might be able to get them to 250, but there's no way they'll go for 280. And we start to sticker shock ourselves out of asking for the right price. So it turns into a pre-discount. We will then figure either we're taking lower rates, or, and this is the worst problem that I see, we don't take lower rates. We just start lying to ourselves about how much time it's going to take to execute it. Like, oh, no, we're not going to need 6 weeks of that junior engineer's time. He'll get it done in 5. And then we build the project's plan and the dollars around a sticker shocked lower number. We go sell it at 250. And then guess what? To deliver world-class work, we know what it takes. And guess what? It takes that guy 6 weeks. So now one of two things is going on. That dude's working a zillion hours, not going home and seeing his family, stressed to the breaking point, or other projects are getting pushed back, or some of both. I mean, it creates a lot of organizational pain and human pain to kid ourselves about what it takes to do good work. We know it. Let's not, take out a red pen and start revising our quote before we ever even propose it to the customer. That pre-discounting is like we shoot arrows at ourselves, and then we put in front of them, and then they get their chance to shoot arrows at us. So stop the pre-discounting. That's another way that internal price discussions become really unproductive.
And it's from a different angle, because we implement HubSpot for people, we're also familiar with SaaS kind of sales framework where they're coming out with a quote, and then it's close to the end of the month, or it's close to the end of the quarter, and what do we need to do to get this deal done? That's the pre-discounting, if you will, that is most familiar to me. But I can absolutely see exactly what you're talking about in the professional services space.
The other challenge in SaaS space is the belief, and it's not that it's wrong, but I think it's flawed, that there's no incremental cost to sell more copies of this software. So there's almost like this zero variable cost kind of belief system that causes people to rush into a discount too quickly, because it's sort of like a version of 100% of 80 grand is better than 0% of 100. So we'll take 80. Right. And that's, the math holds up. That's true. But that's only if we couldn't get 100. And where I see SaaS companies go wrong, and especially if they've got these kind of live and die by the corner points or the month ends is we get into these addiction cycles with discounting, and we train our customers to expect it. They're going to wait until the sellers are freaking out, and it's going to be the 31st at 4 p.m. and they know they just wait. Yeah. Then it's like this big game of poker, right? And who's got the more patient way to play the game. And it's like the sellers over there showing their tail like crazy, and they're losing the poker game, not because the buyer necessarily has a stronger hand to play. What I say about this is, if you sell something really exceptional and profoundly valuable, if you deliver excellence to your customers and you wrap excellence around it and you solve a real problem for your customers, then the discount as the closing tool should not be the first, second, third, fourth, fifth. It should be maybe the 10th arrow we reach for in our quiver to close a deal. But too many folks, it's like the first thing we want to do. We've got excess capacity, or we're missing our sales goal, or XYZ. Let's see what we can, how we can use price as a lever to drive sales. And I would say it's a lever, it's a lazy one. Pull the other 15 ones first that actually keep much more of your money in your pocket and delight your customers. And then if you absolutely once in a while need to use a discount, do it. Just don't let it be your seductive first choice.
Casey, so this is a question which, again, if it doesn't feel right to answer, then that's totally fine. But when you were sort of branding sort of what you do, did you consider becoming a value geek versus a pricing geek? And I can see that pricing is really gets to the core of what it is that we're talking about, even though at the same time it is value, right? But people don't understand value the same way they understand pricing because of this innate fear that all of us have talking about money and cost and price. Is that, can you maybe just give me a little bit of insight into how you get there?
Sure. And you're absolutely right. These two are intimately connected. There is no, like, is $10,000 a lot of money? Well, it's a lot of money for a candy bar. It's not a lot of money for a mansion, right? Like, without context of value, numbers around price, or even some messaging around, like, until we've got context and value rooted in value, price is meaningless. And so these two things cannot exist without one another effectively. So very easily, if we kind of go back to when I was founding this firm and spinning up our marketing materials, could have, leaned into value as part of the story. I, for better or for worse, and I'm always looking at how I can do things better. The value and value selling falls into a broader area of, like, more generalized sales training and sales improvement. And it's a very crowded space. It's hard to stand out and have people understand how you can help them, because everybody talks about value and value selling. Whereas pricing is a very uncrowded space. It's a super blue ocean. There's especially the way we look at it, there's a shocking number. It would shock you. It doesn't shock me. Number of pricing consulting firms that really focus in the analytical role of, like, hey, you're a manufacturer, you sell 20,000 parts in 1 million transactions a month. How do we use the statistics to help make better pricing predictions, optimization, and segmentation and elasticity calculations? That analytical side of pricing, there actually is quite a lot of companies in that space. But in this space of mindset and skill set of the sellers, I don't know of a single other firm in the world that does what we do. They may have a training component that wraps around their software or something, but is like, we live and breathe this problem 365 days a year. So it is both an opportunity for me that it's this blue ocean, but it also does create the challenge of nobody knows this exists. Nobody knows this problem exists. They don't know the solution exists. And so, creating a category is not, I'm not a marketing expert, and I wouldn't feel confident speaking about what it takes to create a category, but that's what we've been, sort of blundering and stumbling through, and sometimes winning at over the past 15 years. But that's why we've decided to go very narrow, very specific, stay in the blue part of our flame with a message that really stands out when we can get the message to people.
Really cool. Thank you. And then, so does that mean that because obviously there's a lot of analytics in the stuff that we do, because obviously without data, you cannot really do a proper technology implementation for your marketing, sales, and customer service teams. So you're obviously using, analytics and data, but you're leaning more into the sort of mindset, skill set side of things.
That's right. And some of that has to do with the kinds of firms we serve. And so I'll say two things about that. One is the size of some of the companies we work with. They just don't have the data infrastructure to support a wildly analytical project. They're not really big enough. They don't have the systems in place to do it. The other is about 50% of our clients are in the professional services space, and you don't have enough transactions. I'm an engineer by training and a Six Sigma black belt from GE. So what I can tell you from my statistical training is, you've got to have a statistically significant sample size before you start making some conclusions about the business. And so many of our clients, we have a client we're working with right now, they had 10 transactions this year. had 10 giant deals, right? And so the data is pretty simple. You look at it as scatter and it's like there's 10 dots on there. You can make some conclusions, but using that data to inform the decision making is generally somewhat limited in a lot of cases. And so we sort of operate from let's start with first principles. Let's shore up the methods, messaging, tools, and confidence of the sellers. Let's make sure it's very intimately tied to the value proposition of this company, and they're really equipped to defend the value and to handle price objections. And then we just, it breaks my heart as an Excel geek and as an engineer, but we don't worry that much about the data. For other of our clients that have a much more robust infrastructure, that have the data, we love to incorporate that into our conversations. That said, we are not an analytics house, so to speak. So if they're looking for one of these optimization softwares, we have lots of partners we can send people to. That's just not the blue part of our flame. We really focus on the skill set and mindset of the seller as the primary focus of our firm.
And I'm sure it makes it easier for anyone who's listening and thinking about this to know when would be a good time to give you a call. And you started talking about something that I had a note about here, which is sort of the business stage that you find you most often work with, and you sort of gave us a couple of examples now, but what would you say is kind of the sweet spot for what is the business stage of your sort of ideal client profile?
Sure. So when we describe our target market, it's essentially a B2B company because they are the ones that have a negotiated sales process, right? And so somebody's out there saying, hey, this is what our services cost, or this is what our product costs. And the customer's saying, no, I won't pay that, or it's outside our budget. Or, that negotiation is a really key element for us to be able to help someone. So if they negotiate pricing, which largely means a B2B space, it can be goods or services. It can be a very competitive and commoditized industry or a very specialized and differentiated industry. What tends to matter more is that they have a best in class or better in class market position, that they are really offering something different than the average bear, and they may be struggling to get paid for it. They're getting downward price pressure from inferior competition. In terms of size, most of our clients are in the $10 to $250 million range. We have some definitely smaller. We have some definitely bigger. They tend to have a sales team of 5+ people. We have offerings that are for a solopreneur on down, or not on down. There's no thing that's smaller than a one-person company, but there's a couple of different offerings for a much smaller firm. But we tend to work with firms 5+ salespeople. I would say an average is maybe about 30 to 40 salespeople. We worked with
it's a big sales
team. We worked with a company last year, and we're getting ready to kick off another cohort with them. We trained about 200 people. So that's a pretty big company for us. But we do all of our programming at a very small scale. And by that, I mean, even though we trained 200 people, we had them in 20 different cohorts of 10 people a piece, because that's where real change in training. Now I'm going to get into my pedagogy speech here, but I'm a little bit of a geek for how adults learn. And change does not happen because somebody sees a different way of looking at things. They have to see a different way of looking at things, and then they have to start to practice it and put it into their own bag of tricks and apply it. And so we use a flipped classroom model where they learn it ahead of time through these modules. And then in the workshops, they're doing breakouts, brainstorms, role play, identifying opportunity, accountability checks. And it's really getting into their own language, their own words. And you cannot do that level of application in a 30 or 40 or 50 person group. You've got to keep it really tight. So everything about our programs is designed to maximize the half-life of training until it becomes permanent and ritual and routine.
It's, again, a lot of parallels with rolling out a CRM in a company. The folks that have a lot more success are the ones that are using a core group of people, kind of working out some kinks before rolling it out to the larger group.
And not just doing a 1,000-person webinar, here's how to use it. You've got to really get personal with people, and they got to get their hands dirty and have a chance to ask their questions and struggle.
Yeah. And there are obviously ways you can get, whether it's 10 or 20 different companies in a room with 1 or 2 or 3 people from each company. But ultimately, what we like to say, when you've seen one company, you've seen one company, right? So even if you line up, 100 professional services firms of all the same size and they all seem to do the same thing, once you look under the hood, there are so many differences, and the differences are what really make the difference in being successful in the stuff that you're doing, I'm guessing, and what we're doing from a CRM implementation perspective.
Discovery is really important there, and really like understanding the unique, in our case, and you have a different set of questions in your discovery process, but we're really need to make sure we understand their, not only the kind of the obvious stuff like what do they sell and who do they sell to, but and what their value prop is, but what's the nature of their sales cycle, how long does it take to close a deal, who in the customer organization are you typically selling to? Is that an operations person? Is it finance? Is it procurement? Is it all of them? How does that decision get made in your organization? What's the competitive landscape? On and on and on the questions go, and all of that is really important for us to be able to tailor what is, in a sense, generally proven content. We do the same content over and over again, but we dress it up in the close of the specific organization we're working with. And it's like, without that tailoring, it's really hard to make a substantial impact to a company.
So what we've seen sort of over the last 5 or 6 years, as we've become of a more of a sort of a all-in-one solution for teams across marketing, sales, and customer service, because one of the biggest challenges we saw up until 5 or 6 years ago is that the marketing team had a solution and a set of tools, the sales team had a solution and a set of tools, the customer service team, etc. So it was all siloed and whatever. And the biggest, I guess you could call it a breakthrough that's happened in the last 5 or 6 years from our perspective, is the sort of how companies are solving for this cross-functionally now, right? And so, and you just talked about various functions within the business that if they're not part of the process, so that the tools, the training, etc., then it's not going to work. And I think it's, for those of us who've been around longer in business, it's even more difficult because we sort of grew up in these silos, right? Whereas a lot of the younger folks, both on our team as well as the teams that we work on, it's like, what are you talking about? Yeah, the world is cross-functional. Just it makes total sense. But often the leaders have to be reminded that, in fact, things don't work the same way that they did 5 or 10 years ago. So has cross-functional become a big term for you and your work too?
Yeah, I think it's, and I'll go back to something you said much earlier, which is like, when we get to the point of talking about the investment, if that's the first time they're thinking about the value of it, then you have lost the game, right? And so creating an understanding and perception of value throughout the customer journey, from the very first marketing contact through the sales process, as the handoff to delivery, through delivery, and back into the funnel again. If we are not really understanding the client's experience of the value of hiring our firm or buying our product, then we're gonna miss. We're gonna drop the ball. We're gonna struggle to be paid what we're worth. So yeah, I for sure, I think it's a healthy blurring of lines that we've seen as well, and that idea of like customer journey mapping and thinking of this not as like even not even thinking of it as handoff between departments, but how do we not make it even feel like a handoff? And I'm seeing things in lots of organizations, like the idea of like a customer success manager or something. And they're almost like kind of sales, kind of operations, kind of customer service. And they're really with that client from the beginning of the process all the way through the delivery of the service. And I think that's really helping the clients, obviously, but from my lens of pricing, that's the best way to ensure that you can get paid higher and higher fees in the future, is if you deliver more and more and more value.
Which really in a different language would just be adding more value, right? And I think professional services firms, and of course manufacturing, et cetera, we can all, and we are learning a lot from where sort of SaaS businesses sort of set the pace for like the metrics that they track. For example, LTV is something that every SaaS company knows and thinks about a lot, whereas there are not a lot of professional services firms, but there's more and more professional services firms, and I would argue probably manufacturing companies as well, who are thinking more in terms of lifetime value, because you don't have to be all that smart a business leader to realize that the best customers you have are the ones that you already have, right? The best customers are the ones you already have, because the sales and marketing cost is a massive saving. And if you can just keep adding value to your existing clients or customers, that's a far better deal than having very smart and expensive marketing and salespeople going out every day to get
brand new business over and over.
Brand new business.
Especially when you consider that so many professional services firms thrive on referral. So another really important role of taking exquisite care of your existing customer base is to protect your referral network. And that's why I think, and again, this my first time I heard this, was in software, but now it's pretty mainstream. This idea of customer experience as a function in the business and customer experience metrics, so helpful to kind of keep our lens on how do we make sure that our clients are wildly successful with our work and that they are raving fans out there in the marketplace telling everybody about us. And if we aren't taking great care of our current customers, we're gonna go broke or exhausted or both, trying to constantly be on the customer acquisition hamster wheel.
The thing that we think about a lot too also is, unfortunately, the term CRM, had a really, I would say, even to me, had kind of a negative connotation up until about 5 years ago, because so many businesses were using it for the way that business was done, and as my kids would say, in the 1900s, where it was used as a prospecting tool. Even though it was called a customer relationship management platform, only in the last really 5 years has there been this sort of hockey stick understanding of, so that you can actually manage the entire life cycle and journey of a customer through this platform. Because so many of my counterparts, and maybe people who are a few years younger or older than me, were sales teams using it as a prospecting tool. They didn't realize that it could actually really be used to grow your existing client base. So that's been one of the better changes that we've seen in the last 5 years.
Well, and really improve that handoff from sales to the delivery team of like, here are the expectations that were set during the sales process. Like, here's what I promised that you guys would deliver,
Right. Right. Do you, I have a question for you, Brendan, how far along that journey do you think we are? And by that, I mean, it's definitely changing. I still encounter a lot of companies that use the CRM in the old way. Is that something you still see a lot of movement necessary on? Or do you see that most companies are getting it?
Well, I'm an optimist. So I like to think that a lot of companies are getting it, but in reality, I was hoping that, there would be more. But it comes directly back to everything we've been talking about, really, which is all around mindset, right? Mindset and or culture and or strategy and or training of people, et cetera. They're all those things all those soft things are so critical. And I would say it's companies that haven't really figured that part out yet. And we know there's a host of different reasons for that. But I think the companies who do figure it out are the ones who are going to become the better in class or best in class businesses.
For sure.
Yeah, it's certainly a competitive edge. Are there any, we're getting like close to time here. Are there any other topics that you wanted to kind of address during our time here that you foresee in the future of pricing strategy, or just anything from your pricing lens?
I mean, I can talk about this all day. Let me think of one more little thing to think about. There's something that we see a lot, and we see this regardless of whether we're talking about a product or a service. So manufacturers and distributors deal with this just as much as professional services firms or construction companies or software companies or anybody in the services space, which is this idea of being compared against someone else and saying, I've got 3 other quotes, you don't have to be the lowest, but you have to be in the ballpark. Can you match this one? And one of the things that, that I see a lot that I think is, again, it's sort of like the discount idea. It's like, it's not that it's a bad idea. It just shouldn't be the item of first resort. Like, what in order of like what I love to see people doing, it's not rush in and match the price. It's not rush in and meet in the middle. Or the number 3 one, which I see a lot, I call it the fruit salad approach, which is, let's make sure these 2 things are apples to apples. And we start tearing open both quotes and we start looking at all the things that are the same and different. It's not that the apples to apples approach doesn't work or that there's no place for it. It's just not where I ever want to start. It's like now we're in a deep dive conversation with our customers about our competitors, and I don't really want to start there. Like, I would rather start, it's almost like asking, if your husband, likes the way his ex-wife, like, he's just like, I don't want to talk about her. I want to talk about me. Let's talk about us. Let's you and I talk about each other. Let's not talk about that person. They aren't in this conversation. So how do we keep the conversation focused on our relationship and what works? And so, another one that I don't love. So meet in the middle, apples to apples. And then the fourth one that I hate, that I not hate, but it's too quickly used, is this, like, let me vomit a bunch of value messaging you about why we're better and why we're great. And the problem is that what I would tell you is, if a customer is saying, here's a lower quote, what they're saying is, I want to do business with you. It's a buying signal. They're
Yes, that's a
cheaper.
great
You
point.
are better. I don't want them. I want you. I'm hoping to try to
What can you
convince
do?
you to give it to me for less, but this isn't the one I wanted. If this is the one I wanted, this conversation wouldn't even be occurring. I wouldn't be in your office. We wouldn't be on Zoom. So they're saying, I want you more. And the first thing we rush in and do is, like, try to convince them to want us. It's like, no, they already want us. We just don't know why or by how much. And we're never going to figure that out if we're monologuing at them. And so I really like the role of questions here to help people understand what that buying signal is really about and how much price power you really have. They just got done telling you they want you. We don't know why and by how much. And here's an example of a question that can be helpful in this regard. Like, you could say, look, I want this business. Thank you so much for coming back to me with this opportunity. I want to come back to you with something that's really going to work for you. So that I do that in a way that's most helpful to you. Do you mind if I ask you a couple questions first? Yeah, no problem. Okay. If we could just magically erase the price difference, if these prices for our proposal and this competitive proposal are exactly the same, are you telling me that you would choose us? Do I understand you correctly? Yes. Okay. Help me understand, because I want to make sure when I come back to you with a revised proposal, nothing comes out that's critical to you. What is it about our proposal, our services, our team, our company, what we've put together that has you answer that way? Why would we be the choice if price were no issue? And then shut the heck up and listen. Some version of that question. The shut the heck up and listen is really important, because people tend to fill in the silence too much when they're nervous, and then they don't get to hear the answers. So we have to stop talking. But if we stop talking, we might hear something that gives us information that there really is a compelling differentiator that this client really values that we know that competitor doesn't have. Now, I'll say something obvious. Customers aren't dumb. They're not going to be like, well, they can't start till next year, but we need it done by August. So, but if you'll discount, we'd like that. They're not going to trot out their price power and lay it on your plate. They're not like foolish in that fashion. But I also have a lot of confidence in the seller's ability to ask smart questions, dive in, understand more, stay at this sort of consultative selling level. Don't drop down to a transaction where we're starting to talk about price. Like, what is it that you value? Let me make sure I'm understanding why we would be your choice. Let me make sure I understand blah, blah, blah. And you get into a dialogue. At the end of that, you can still play the apples to apples game. You can still discount, but don't start by talking about the competitor, and don't start by discounting. Start by understanding what it is that's behind that buying signal in the first place. And you will oftentimes find that no discount is even needed at all, that they are really just trying to save some money because that's the human thing to do, but they're very convinced to buy from you.
Or their boss said, see if you can get the price down, which I've been in that situation as well.
Yeah, use this quote to beat these guys up.
The worst they could say is
That's right.
no.
It's what I call the can't hurt to ask club.
Yes. Yeah. That was great.
Thank you.
That's a really good piece of advice.
Yeah, really good. So, but Casey, I got to ask you one other question. So we're both professional services businesses, right? Yours and ours. And we both work with a lot of professional services firms. What do you think is the biggest opportunity that we all have as professional services firms at the moment with regards to AI?
Oh my gosh. I'm geeking out about it, like, all the time.
Well, I figured as an engineer, you've got to be all over this.
Oh, for sure. And I've got like 3 books on my desk that I'm reading simultaneously about it. And my big challenge is I want to spend more time on it than I can. I think that the opportunity it presents is enormous. I'm not scared about it at all. I'm a total optimist about the role of AI in professional services and beyond.
Hallelujah.
I think that it is going to create so much value and so much bandwidth that is taken up by special, like, my brain is a fine instrument, and in 50% of my time it's not doing the thing it's absolutely uniquely capable of doing. So if that 50% of that time could be replaced by AI, then then how much am I capable of creating? How much are my team capable of creating if we take away all the rote tasks, and not just the rote? I mean, this is the thing about AI in 2024. It's performing tasks that are very advanced and high level, always with a human eye on it. Never make the mistake of just spray and pray. You got to really double check the work and make sure that it represents your brand. But I think for my firm, and I would encourage anybody in a professional services firm to take this tack. What is possible with AI that could never happen without it, and lean into that and spend your time thinking about that and spend your time playing on these models and experimenting. And I am blown away daily by what's possible.
In summary, sort of, imagine how much more value you could add if you were leaning into AI. Yeah, as a professional services
That's
firm.
right. And I don't think, I feel that a lot of services firms are a little afraid that their clients will perceive the value as lower if some of it is machine generated, if it's, large language model generated. And I would say they care about value and the most value. And I don't, and I would say as a consumer or as a business owner that buys services, I feel the same. I don't care where the value comes. Give me the most value. The more valuable it is, the more valuable I perceive the partnership. The more valuable it is, the more valuable what value I'm willing to place in terms of higher fees. If you can create more value with tools, why would I ever think it's better for you not to use the tool? Doesn't make any sense. I think, it's not surprising to me that some firms are operating from a place of fear. It's a huge change so fast. It's like bringing a decade forward, in every month. But what a huge opportunity. I'm pumped about it.
No, I'm with you. I'm so glad. I'm so pleased about your answer, because I'm asking a lot of people the same question, and there's not a lot that are giving me the level of answer that I really want to hear, which is the one you just gave me. So yeah, thanks so much.
I'm pedal to the metal on AI. Yeah. And I think that, I was at a conference last week and I listened to a speaker talk about AI, and he said the more you use AI in the business, the more it's really important to understand where human is special and different, and where we uniquely focus on the human. It's just enabled by the AI. So the more AI you use, the more human you have to be, was kind of his point. And I think that's true, but I also think the more human you can be, because you're not doing tasks that a machine can do.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's really awesome. It's really inspiring to me.
Yeah. And it's almost, so, one of the other things that I think and talk about a lot is, again, the last century was the year of management. This century is the year of coaching, and businesses will grow and be better in class because their managers are better coaches than their competitors, right? Or whether you want to bring in the competition or not. But I think the next level is, to your point, we have to coach the AI into doing the things that only we know, what it could look like, and we need to coach AI to build that thing for us. Whether it's an LLM so that it's continuously improving, it can only improve if we're coaching the AI to do those things. So yeah, I love how it's all coming together.
I'm excited about it. I think it's huge.
Well, before we turn this into episode 2.0 about AI, I just want to say thank you, Casey. This was a really insightful conversation. I kind of thought it might be, but you delivered.
Thanks.
And we really appreciate you participating, and look forward to conversations with you in the future.
Thanks.
For sure.
It was a real pleasure having this conversation. Thank you so much.